You are Locked On Jets POSTCAST. Part of Locked On Sports New York on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The New York Jets play an ugly football game that makes us feel like we're back in 2022 all over again. Welcome in to this Locked On Jets postcast. I am your host, Chris Schubert, as we break down the New York Jets 10-9 loss at home over the Denver Broncos, moving them to 2-2 on the season in what had awful written all over it. You name a group for this team, they had an awful performance, at least at one point during the course of these four quarters. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, it's simple. The New York Jets lose at home in a game they should not lose, a game that should have been a very comfortable win with the way this defense played in the first half. But you look up at the end of this game, and the New York Jets get not one, but two opportunities to try to put together a game-winning drive in the fourth quarter. They are unable to do so. Greg Zuerlein misses a 50-yard, what would have been a game. They would have gone ahead. I don't know if it would have been a game-winning field goal. It would have been a potential game-winning field goal to put them up 12-10. But the New York Jets do not score a touchdown on offense. They give up just one touchdown on defense, and they lose 10-9. And you see it there on the side on what's on today's show, Time Machine, ? Feels like we're back in the 2022-2023 New York Jets Robert Saleh era. A game in which the defense does what they do, hold teams to field goals, maybe one touchdown, an offense that isn't able to do enough. And here we are kind of playing with our food in the fourth quarter and in the second half. And the New York Jets all of a sudden look up and they're losers in this game. And they fall to 2-2 in a game that you just have to have if you want to be considered one of the top tier teams in the AFC, and a game that could very easily come back to haunt them when it comes to a wild card chase in the AFC. There's nothing good about this performance. The notes are all over the place. We have the book, as we normally do here on the show, and the main word that I think you can use for this game, inconsistent. They couldn't find consistency anywhere on offense. And any time they had a brief moment, a brief pocket, a play, maybe a play or two where you thought, okay, this is why Aaron Rodgers is here. Yes, this is ugly, but we've got a quarterback that knows how to deal with these types of situations. It's raining. Points are going to be at a premium. We got a good defense. Rodgers is going to be able to put up enough points with this offense. You had those plays where you thought that was going to be the case, and your mood probably shifted toward, Jets are going to win this game. Jets are going to end up winning this game by a touchdown or, maybe 10 points. And we worried for nothing. Yet every time they had those plays, there were things that just knocked them backwards, whether it was Aaron Rodgers missing by just a little bit because of the weather, whether it was receivers, and specifically on the drive for what would have been potential game-winning field goal. I mean, Xavier Gibson doesn't turn for the ball. Garrett Wilson, I think, is still running on the route that he never turned around on, where Rodgers threw it at his ankles because, again, he never turned around for the ball. So it was miscommunication there. Rodgers was missing a little bit. You had honestly, do we know what the final penalty count was? I'm going to look at the team stats because I lost count in this game of how many total penalties there ended up being. Called penalties against the New York Jets in this football game, 13 penalties for 90 yards. Like I said, this was a time machine back to last year. It was a time machine back to 2 years ago, where you have a defense that, for all intents and purposes in the first half, looked like the 2022-2023 defense. They looked like that elite version. I know it's the Denver Broncos. I know it was Bo Nix. I know it was raining. I know Sean Payton didn't call a great game, but they came up with plays. It wasn't bend but don't break. It was, we're elite. We're going to stop you. We're going to constantly, over and over and over again, give our offense a chance. And you thought, if that's the version of the New York Jets defense you're going to get every week, with this offense, with this quarterback, this should be smooth sailing. And yet it wasn't. And I do not want to blame the weather, because the weather worked both ways. The Broncos were able to get enough on that one drive to score a touchdown. Jets left Courtland Sutton wide open on a just somebody's got to pick him up. He's the number one target on this team. Somebody's got to pick him up, and they weren't able to do so, and it leads to the touchdown that changes this game. Because even at 6-0, you felt like, okay, Jets are, it's not great. One drive could change the tide of this game, and the Jets could never deal that final blow, that touchdown to go up 13-0. To potentially really put a lot of pressure on a Broncos offense that couldn't move the ball. And again, this defense played, at least in the first half. We'll get to getting back to present day. We'll take the time machine and we'll come back to present day because we saw some of the things that have plagued this team over the first 2 weeks of the season, specifically in this game today. But the defense played well enough in the first half for that not to have just been a one-score game. And the offense just couldn't get anything done. They got pinned deep. The field possession game, specifically in the first quarter, I mean, there were 21 total yards of offense by both teams in the first quarter. That first quarter, you just hide that tape. You don't even need to look at that tape. That was ugly. But you get pinned deep off of the punt after your defense responds when you fumble on the opening drive. So it goes fumble after you give up a really bad sack. And the offensive line left a lot to be desired today. A lot of pressures and a lot of sacks to Aaron Rodgers. Came off the field limping at one point, which is probably the worst nightmare for Jets fans. So you go fumble after a sack. Your defense responds, but you get pinned deep, and then you get a bunch of penalties, and then you give the ball right back, and your defense responds. So you're playing this field possession game in the first quarter, and you're going back and forth, and you're losing the field position battle because you're giving Denver some short field after the fumble. Nothing. You drive them back. You get pinned deep. You punt, give them a short field. Nope, you drive them back. And so you feel like, okay, those are the two best opportunities they're going to get based off of the turnover and the field position. And now that things can kind of even out a little bit, the Jets are going to be able to find that gear. They never found the gear. They were behind the chains constantly in the first half. They just were miscues. Breece Hall had his worst game as a New York Jet, and I'm surprised they didn't heavily go to Braylon Allen early in this game. There were pockets of time where you could clearly tell they were favoring Braylon Allen, the hard-nosed downfield runner, to just keep this offense ahead of schedule, open up their ability to pass the ball. But, Breece had a couple drops. Couldn't get really anything going in the running game. Just was not his best performance. And this is where you have to have a coaching staff that's able to adjust and say, you know what, we've got two really good backs here. This is nothing against Breece. This game script, this game environment, it is not set up for him right now. He's struggling. We've got another back. We got to give him some extended run. We've got to give him an opportunity to maybe try to take this game over. Because the first time the Jets offense moved with some urgency, some efficiency that made you think they were going to take over this game was when they featured Braylon Allen as the featured back, when they gave him some run. I mean, Braylon Allen finished the game 8 carries for 34 yards. That's nothing to write home about, but 4.3 yards per carry. Breece Hall had 10 carries for 4 yards, 0.4 yards per carry. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't get anything going. And again, it's nothing against Breece. He had a bad game. The weather was putrid. Although maybe not as putrid as some people on the internet were making it seem. The weather was putrid. They couldn't get any push with the offensive line. The offensive line had a rough game today. The pressures on Aaron Rodgers, the struggles in the run game, the penalties was, again, one that you're going to want to forget rather quickly. But it's so frustrating for a team that had this much time off. If they're playing 3 games in 11 days, to have this much time off between games, to be that unprepared, to be that off their game, off of what we thought was their A game, the way they played on Thursday night against the New England Patriots. It was just a disappointing effort. We're going to travel back to present day. We went the time machine, went back to 2022 and 2023 and looked at a team that, at least in the first half, it looked like a game from 2022 or 2023. We're going to get back to present day because that second half looked a lot like what had been plaguing the New York Jets at the beginning of the season. So we'll get into that here in just a second. The Gametime app. You're going to want to download the Gametime app today. They got a new feature called Gametime Picks that make getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And the Gametime app got a lot of options. We talked about Gametime Picks, but they've also got the all-in pricing. You can toggle this feature on, and it shows the total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout. Again, you toggle that feature on, no surprise fees at checkout. You see the total price upfront. Seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference, and the Gametime ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. The second half for the New York Jets looked a lot like that first game against San Francisco looked. It looked a lot like the game against Tennessee. The New York Jets defense got gashed in the running game. They did not have an ability in the second half to stop the run. And you look at the numbers at the end of the day, Javonte Williams went for 4.8 yards per carry. Jaleel McLaughlin went 5.1 yards per carry. They were able in the second half to find their running game. They were able to play to their strengths because Bo Nix, the New York Jets lost the game in which Bo Nix went 12 for 25 for 60 yards and a touchdown. The New York Jets lost the game in which they held the opposing quarterback to 60 yards. They lost the game in which they allowed only 126 yards on the ground. They didn't get gashed for 200 plus. They took away the passing game, but in the second half, Denver was able to do enough on the ground. They were able to find enough consistency on the ground to lead to the touchdown, and that was all she wrote. And so that's where the 2022-2023 defense, we came back to present day, and it looked a lot like that full game against San Francisco, looked like that Tennessee game, where they just were unable to stop the run. And in the second half of this game, they were getting gashed in the running game. They were getting absolutely torched in the running game, and they did not have an answer, and it led to them being behind the eight ball. And you look, again, it's littered all throughout my notes in every quarter, and I break down the game by quarters in the book, right? I go first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and I make notes based on the drive. And it's everywhere. It's just penalties. There is no quarter in which they didn't have a penalty that absolutely crushed them, that just stifled any level of consistency. When you are a team that is trying to go far and is trying to have the expectations that this team has on them, the things you can't do is you can't commit unforced errors. And the New York Jets today committed every unforced error in the book. And I know at the end of the day, it is a penalty that probably shouldn't have been called. But Allen Lazard flipping the ball near a Broncos defender leads to a penalty that knocks them out of what was a drive that was trending towards potentially being 6. They get down into the red zone, can't get it in on the 1 yard line, even though we try to give it to Breece Hall, just could not figure out a way to get the ball into the end zone. And then on 4th and 1, they're going to go out there and go for it, and then you get a false start. And I just look at a team that had 13 penalties called against them for 90 yards. And I look at coaching, and I wonder, where is the accountability from the coaching? There needs to be accountability from the coaching for this type of performance. This type of stuff does not fly for a team that has the expectations that this team has on them. And with a performance like today, maybe the expectations need to change of what we think this team is going to be. Because this is one, said it earlier, you take the tape and you throw this one away. This team was abysmal on offense. And I'm not going to give the defense too much grief for allowing the one touchdown in the second half and getting torched in the run game for one half. They did what they normally do. They held a team to under 17 points. And the fact that the New York Jets, with a healthy Aaron Rodgers in 2024, couldn't score enough points, and I don't care about the weather, but the fact that they couldn't score enough points to beat the Denver Broncos, who had 60 yards passing and were only able to get up 10 points. There needs to be some people looking in the mirror tonight. There was a lack of adjustments. There was a lack of accountability. There was a lack of urgency at times. It was just a team that was, albeit a team that could have won this game. They had a chance to go on a drive with less than 2 minutes to go to win the game. And even on that drive, you saw just how inconsistent and just how off this offense was. Xavier Gibson not turning around for the ball. Garrett Wilson not turning around for the ball. And you get an opportunity for Greg Zuerlein to kick a potential game-winning 50-yard field goal. And in that rain, it was never going to happen. You just saw Will Lutz miss one from 53. It was never going to happen. You had to get closer, and they were unable to get closer. And that just feels like the takeaway. This was a team that just couldn't get that extra play, get that extra step, get those extra couple of yards when they needed to find that consistency. It was just a abysmal. I think in the graphic I used awful. Over there I used awful for the coaching performance. But we'll just call it an abysmal, awful performance from this team across the board. And the penalties are the thing that are just so inexcusable from this performance. You can't commit that many penalties. You can't consistently stop yourself. This was what we talked about. Hop in, everybody. We're going back in the time machine. When we watched this team play in 2022 and 2023 under Zach Wilson, we constantly watched a team that was, again, pockets of time, showing that, okay, maybe they found something. Maybe they're going to be able to put together enough. Again, it wasn't going to be a top 5, top 10 offense, but that they could do enough with what they were getting on the defensive side of the ball to be able to win football games. And just when you thought that you would have those types of drives, there would be a penalty, or there would be a turnover, or there would be some self-inflicted wound that allowed the team to not gain that consistency. That was littered all over the field today. I mean, we have a Tyron Smith false start that stalls a drive. On special teams, Irv Charles just runs into the kick returner. It gives Denver good field position. Now, that didn't lead to anything specifically, but those are things you can't do, because if the Denver Broncos don't take advantage, guess what? The Buffalo Bills will take advantage of Irv Charles running into the kick returner. The Bengals, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the teams that you're going to be directly competing with, the Texans, these teams you're going to be directly competing with potentially in the AFC playoff picture, if that's where this team's still trying to get to, you got to be able to clean those things up. You can't have Tyron Smith, your veteran left tackle, committing false starts in bad spots. You can't have Simpson false start when Aaron Rodgers is going hard count in the second quarter to start the second quarter when it's 4th and 1 and you're trying to punch it in for a touchdown to go up 7-0. Can't have that. John Simpson was brought here to be a huge part of this interior. Can't have those types of plays. You can't have that Lazard penalty. You can't have the penalties that constantly stop this team from gaining any level of momentum. Again, it looked like I was watching the 2022 New York Jets. Now, that being said, there were a lot of things, or there were pockets of time where you saw what this team is trying to do. You saw Rodgers, despite everything breaking down in front of him, be able to roll out and scramble. You saw him be able to hit his guys in stride. You saw him get the free play, throw that ball to Garrett Wilson that I don't think he got in bounds, but they called him in bounds on the field, so they went with the call that was on the field. You saw on the drive to try to kick the potential game-winning field goal, throws up a one-on-one ball for Mike Williams, draws the DPI. You saw all of the things that this team wants to be when they're playing their A-plus game. You just didn't see it enough for it to be considered an A-plus game. You saw it enough for it to be a D-minus game. Because you had, I keep harping back on the penalties because I think that's a reflection of coaching. Because Aaron Rodgers was brought in here to try to win a Super Bowl. And Aaron Rodgers demands a lot of his teammates. He demands perfection. He demands excellence. That's what you want your quarterback to do. And when you have that many penalties, I think it's a poor reflection on leadership and on coaching for them to have this level of performance. We will try to wrap this thing up. We'll maybe try to find a couple more positives here from this disappointing loss. 2-2, the New York Jets fall to as they lose 10-9 to the Denver Broncos. But we will get into a little bit more from this game here on the other side. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Make sure you're subscribed here to the Locked On Sports New York YouTube channel, and you've got that notification bell turned on so you know that when we go live covering your favorite New York sports teams, you will see me if you're watching me on the YouTube side of things. I've got my New York Mets hat on, and I am very much keeping an eye on what the New York Mets are doing because I will have a postcast for that game as well today for the New York Mets trying to get into the National League playoff race, trying to lock up a playoff spot, and they need to take care of business today against the Milwaukee Brewers. We got Jay Berman covering you on the Giants side of things. Got the Knicks starting around the corner. So you're going to want to be locked on with us here on the Locked On Sports New York YouTube channel. So go ahead and give us a subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us here on the YouTube side of things, especially if you're listening in the Locked On Jets podcast feed. And I'm sure John is going to have a lot of thoughts when he puts out his episode breaking down this performance. He has a little bit more time than maybe I do here on these postcasts, maybe debrief a little bit and maybe cool the temperatures down, but I don't know if there's cooling down temperatures for a team that played this poorly, for a team that wasn't able to, again, find anything consistently. And we've talked so much about the penalties. I want to get into another element of what I thought was a poor coaching performance from this team. And we touched a little bit on the Braylon Allen, Breece Hall thing, but there's one other thing that I think really kind of hampered this team's ability to break out and potentially put this game on ice earlier than the second half before, again, playing with their food a little bit, allowing Denver to stay in this game and ultimately winning it. It just felt like they were constantly behind the chains because of the penalties, because they weren't able to gain anything on first down. But I didn't think the play calling was all that great. I didn't think they found a rhythm. Garrett Wilson gets the first catch of the game and he fumbles it. I get that. But when I look at Garrett Wilson ending with, again, he ended up with 5 catches for 41 yards and 8 targets. It took way too long to get Garrett Wilson involved in this game. It took way too long to find number 5 to try to get him going, to try to potentially put a touchdown on the board. I mean, he only had 1 catch, the 1 target for the 7 yards and the fumble in the first half. And I get it. You can't have those kinds of mistakes, but that's your best player on offense. Today, especially, was with Breece Hall struggling the way that he did. So you have to find ways. I don't care that he's matched up against Patrick Surtain. I don't want to hear every week that all these teams are playing cover 2 and they're doing everything that they need to do to just take away Garrett Wilson. And, Pat Surtain's a really good corner. Great. The great wide receivers in this league, they find a way. You think Justin Jefferson complains about the coverage and who he gets matched up with? You think Jamar Chase, who caught a touchdown today, complains? And we talk about cover 2 and we talk about, what corners matched up. No, the great receivers, the elite receivers of this game. And we all think that Garrett Wilson is on a trajectory to be in that conversation. They find ways. And I don't know if there was enough finding of ways for this team in the first half. They found it a little bit in the second half, and he ended up with what are better numbers. If you're playing in fantasy PPR, that's going to be a little bit more respectable than what it looked like in the first half. But you got to find more ways to get him involved in this offense. And again, you have to make a shift mid-game. It's raining. You're struggling to gain anything on the ground. And the moment you make the switch and you feature Braylon Allen as the featured back, you start gaining ground because that's the type of runner he is. He thrives in these environments. Give me the ball. Let me work downhill. I'll run people over. This is a grindy type game. I'm a grindy type back. Give me the ball. Once they started doing that, they were able to find a little bit of offense. They should have continued to do that. They should have found a way to get him more involved. And so Braylon Allen making the switch and making him the feature back. Again, you're not benching Breece Hall for the entire game. This is what's working for us. We're going to go with what's working. And I have been one that has tried to praise Nathaniel Hackett when it is warranted. But I'm the first person to criticize him when things are not going very well. Today is one that I think Nate Hackett's going to want back because I don't think that the play calling was very good. I don't believe the adjustments in game were very good. You got Xavier Gibson lined up all the way out wide, and we're throwing him, a one-on-one ball. Is that really where we want Xavier Gibson? We saw what Mike Williams was able to do out there. We saw what Garrett Wilson was able to do out there. Free play. We find Wilson. We throw the one-on-one ball to Mike Williams to get the DPI. Those are the guys you want on the outside. Not sure if Xavier Gibson's the guy that we want on the outside to throw the ball to, and he doesn't turn around on that one route. That if he turns around, it's an easy completion, and the Jets are into field goal range, and it's not just a 50-yard field goal for Greg Zuerlein to win the game. It's probably more in the 30s. Again, the utilization of the personnel that he had today, I didn't think was very good. And this is going to be a tough pill to swallow because how many times in 2022 and 2023 did we say the defense played well enough, but the offense wasn't able to find a way? And I never thought in 2024 with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, that is what we would be saying about a New York Jets team. But today, they dusted off the script from 2022 and 2023, and they just played it out. And you may want to say, oh, the weather was bad, and it's bad for both sides. Bo Nix struggled, but they found a way. He found a way to make throws. And Rodgers made throws on that last drive. But this team is not where they need to be in order to go to the heights that they want to go to. And I think today's performance, the last 2 weeks, beating Tennessee and then beating up on New England, I think gave us a little bit of false confidence about the way this team was going because you cannot have a performance like this if you want to be a team that is competing for an AFC championship and to go to the Super Bowl, which is what you brought Aaron Rodgers in here for. So they're going to have to figure it out in a hurry because they got the Minnesota Vikings up next. That's a good football team that is playing incredibly well. And if they play like this, if they have this level of inconsistency, that's going to be a long trip back from London to take on Buffalo on Monday Night Football. That is going to be a long trip back. That is going to do it for us here on this Locked On Jets postcast, and just a disappointing performance for the New York Jets as they turned in an abysmal offensive performance, couldn't get anything going, and just absolutely left the door wide open for Sean Payton, Bo Nix, and the Denver Broncos to walk on through, and they strutted through that door and found a way to win 10-9. And this is one that I hope at the end of the season we're not looking back on as this is the game that the Jets are going to want back if they miss the playoffs. But that's going to do it for us here on this Locked On Jets postcast. Like I said, make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Turn on that notification bell so you know that when we go live. And if you're listening to us on the Locked On Jets podcast feed, we do these after each and every Jets game. I will be back bright and early for that game against Minnesota next Sunday when they go to London, and we will have a postcast for you here as well. So you can join us on the live side of things, or if you're enjoying us in the podcast feed, we have you covered there as well. But that is going to do it for us here on this edition of the Locked On Jets postcast, as the New York Jets unfortunately fall in an abysmal performance 10-9 to the Denver Broncos, and we'll have to do some soul searching before they head off to London to take on the Minnesota Vikings. See you, everybody.